Everyone. Welcome to the second of 3 parts in this Revelwood webinar series. We're very excited to continue our discussion on the convergence of TM1 on-premise with Planning Analytics in the cloud in the form of IBM's newest release, Planning Analytics Local. In this second part, we'll give you a brief overview of Planning Analytics Local, as well as a live demo of PAx, or Planning Analytics for Excel. First, I'd like to go over a couple of frequently asked questions. Will I be able to get a copy of these slides after the event, and is today's event being recorded for future viewing? And the answer to both of those questions is yes. You'll also have the ability to ask questions during the presentation by simply clicking the Q&A menu located on the right-hand side of your screen. Type in your question, hit enter. We'll do our best to answer them during the webinar or at the end of the session. I'd like to introduce you to today's presenters. My name is John Prasisto. I am the Client Success Manager with Revelwood. I have with me Dan Bernatchez, who is our Financial Performance Management Practice Leader and Chief Solution Architect for TM1. Dan has over 25 years experience in the FPM space, specifically working with TM1, and is one of the original founders of Revelwood. Okay, a little about our agenda for the webinar. First, we'll go over a brief overview of Revelwood. I'll then hand it to Dan for an introduction to Planning Analytics Local as an overview and a demonstration of PAx. Next, we'll finish up with a Q&A session. Again, feel free to submit your questions. We'll address as many as we can, or we'll make sure to follow up with you individually after the webinar. Okay, next, a brief overview of Revelwood. As an IBM Analytics Premier Partner, we cover a broad spectrum of business analytics solutions, but of particular expertise in the Office of Finance, covering all things related to financial planning and reporting. In our 20-year history, we've helped hundreds of Fortune 1000 and mid-sized clients incorporate analytics into their everyday thinking, helping them gain a competitive advantage and drive improved outcomes. We've won several IBM and industry awards, and are very proud to have been named the first ever recipient of IBM's Worldwide Customer Analytics Business Partner of the Year at this year's World of Watson conference. With that, I will pass it over to Dan to introduce you to Planning Analytics Local and go over the demo for PAx.
All right, thank you, John. Yeah, so I do want to do a brief overview of what Planning Analytics Local is. I understand on the call we may have people who are current TM1 users. We may have people who are current Planning Analytics on the cloud users who are looking at what's new in the 2.0 version of Planning Analytics. We may have people on the call who actually are looking to purchase Planning Analytics. So I'm going to try to serve all of the constituencies as much as I can over the course of this. So hopefully this will be useful. I do believe it's important to start with what is Planning Analytics Local. So everyone who is used to in the past on an on-premise environment, you're used to the concept of the lower portion of the screen here. 10.1, 10.2, you'd install it in a machine in your local environment. That was kind of I'll call it the old school way of having TM1 on a on-premise environment. And for those of you who started with TM1 on the cloud, the initial release of TM1 on the cloud was actually called TM1 on the cloud, and it moved to Planning Analytics 1.0. And when it moved into that environment, they added on to it the Watson Analytics and the BI component. And they packaged that into one environment. With Planning Analytics 2.0, both on the cloud and on-premise, you're getting the same release. So what you're getting is when Planning Analytics 2.0 happens on the cloud, the entire Planning Analytics environment is being upgraded. Watson is on a continuous improvement path. The Planning Analytics component will still use the interfaces that are in it today, which is a TM1 Web component, the ability to produce TM1 Web content, via a perspective component, plus the ability to use the PAx component, which we'll be going over today, the Excel interface against your TM1 model, as well as the Planning Workspace component. So all that's being upgraded to version 2.0. As part of that release, IBM is introducing the ability to have all of that available to you as a on-premise implementation as well. So with Planning Analytics 2.0, when you upgrade from 10.2.2 or 10.2 TM1 to Planning Analytics 2.0, you get the upgrade to your TM1 server and you get TM1 perspectives, but you also get the Planning Analytics Excel interface, which is PAx. You get Planning Workspace locally. It's available to you. There's an additional licensing charge for it, but it is available to you. And of course, you get the TM1 Web interface. The other items here were Watson Analytics and Cognos Analytics, the BI component. Those are also available to you, but they're not part of Planning Analytics Local itself. Planning Analytics Local is the TM1 Web, the Perspectives environment, the PAx environment, and the Planning Workspace environment. This is also being packaged as a Planning Analytics Express. If you're currently on Cognos Express, there is an option to upgrade to Planning Analytics Express, which would include these components as its own item. So what is Planning Analytics Local? The transformation part of it is really twofold. So you get your standard TM1 components, right? Your TM1 server components are still there. Your TM1 perspectives components are still there. TM1 web components are still there. I'll say that they've been improved and there are additional capabilities and functionality. But the new stuff and the key functional differences we've tried to note on this slide. So one is you have available to you the workspace component. We went over that in the first webinar series. If you haven't had a chance to see that or you are part of that, we do have that recorded online so we can see that component. In addition to that, for those of you who remember CAFE, which is Cognos Analysis for Excel, that has now been rebranded as PAx, PAx. It is an entire new interface. It has a lot more capabilities within it. We'll try to go over those as much as we can today, hopefully give you a good flavor of everything that's available to you. And then the third part of our webinar series is going to go over hierarchies and the impact of hierarchies on the capabilities for analysis within TM1, and also the impact of how hierarchies will make it so that your design of your TM1 models actually has impact with the introduction of hierarchies. It's actually a very powerful component for the TM1 environment. But that's for our next webinar series. Today we're going to be focusing on the PAx environment. So, sorry, this is another slide on hierarchies and its benefit for memory savings and flexibility and performance. And again, we'll go over that in the next webinar series. So, with Planning Analytics Local, you now get the ability to have Workspace available to you. And in addition to that, the interfaces for Workspace, for PAx, for TM1 Web, they're trying to, or the goal is to make them all look uniform. And Planning Analytics version 2 is the first big cut of making those environments look more uniform. And to look more uniform, they actually share components. So the installation of Planning Analytics Local is a little bit more complicated than the standard TM1 installation. The standard TM1 installation would have a TM1 database component to it, so you install the TM1 database server. And if you were using the TM1 Web component, there would be an installation of that. Sometimes that would happen on the same machine. Sometimes that would happen on a separate instance. With Planning Analytics Local, there is a need or requirement to install the Workspace component, even if you're not going to use it, because PAx uses aspects of Workspace to make the Workspace and the PAx environments have the same look and feel. So when you install Planning Analytics Local, there is a requirement to actually install the Workspace component as well, so that should be considered for those of you that are kind of moving in that direction. I forgot to go over the slide in the last presentation. I did want to mention it in this one. Okay, so what's new in PAx? It's basically an entirely rebranding of the CAFE environment. It has an entire new user experience. The ribbon has been totally revamped. Additional toolbar items have been done. and we'll be going over all of this. It's an entire new look and feel. The overview tree, the task pane has been redone. Capabilities within the right-click menu, it's all been re-updated to give you a much richer experience within the Excel environment, and also take over a lot more of what Perspectives had previously done. As I mentioned, Planning Analytics for Excel uses the Workspace or interoperates with the Workspace components. So when you edit a set item and you pick an item, and I'll show this when we go over the actual demo, when we pick an element from a dimension using the set editor in Planning Analytics for Excel, it's actually using the exact same piece of code that Workspace uses for the same function. So if you're in Workspace, how that's going to look and feel to you, or you're in PAx, how that's going to look and feel to you, it's going to look exactly the same. It's actually using the same set of code to do that. In addition, we have the ability to use the Workspace Cube Viewer capability. And then again, this is to give a much more uniform look and feel for the end users of the overall application. The other big thing, as I mentioned, is that PAx is taking over a lot of the things that Perspectives used to do. For those of you that remember Café, one of Café's big things was a cross-tab report. They also kind of called it an expiration in their environment. They also had something called a flex view. And of course, TM1 had the concept of active forms. So as part of this release, of course, they renamed everything. So just for terminology's sake, and again, I'll be going over this during the demo, the old crosstab concept of Café is now called an exploration. So when you're browsing and you're exploring your data within the Excel environment of PAx, it's called an exploration. Then when you're creating reports within the Excel environment, you have three types of reports. You have dynamic reports. That is using the same Excel functions that active forms used. So it's a combination of the DBRW with the TM1 report row functions. So that is, dynamic reports are basically active forms. Custom reports are purely Excel reports that use DBRW. So you can do whatever you want with it. You're just using the DBRW function to bring data into the report. So you think of a custom report as like what used to be called a slice out of the old TM1 browser. It would create a linked Excel file, but just using subnyms and DBRW functions. And then you have quick reports. Quick reports are the old flex views of Café. They've been rebranded as quick reports. So same basic functionality. The active form functionality has been added into PAx, and they just rebranded the naming convention to hopefully isolate what each of these capabilities are. I'm not going to talk a ton about this slide. PAx is an add-in to Excel, just like the old Perspectives add-in used to be. It's compatible with 32 and 64-bit. It is compatible with Excel 2010, but that's going to be phased out. They really want you to be moving to Excel 2013. There are some major changes from a Microsoft standpoint from Excel 2010 to 2013, and it's a much more stable environment for you to work with. Strangely enough, I'm actually going to be showing you the demo today with Excel 2010 because of the environment that was provisioned. It runs on the different versions of Windows and so on. One key thing to understand when you're migrating from Perspectives to PAx, Perspectives workbooks will open in PAx. We've done a fair amount of testing ourselves on this. We feel pretty confident in it. Depending on the size of your workbook, it will take some time to do that conversion. But action buttons, if you've used action buttons of Perspectives in your workbooks, those will need to be migrated. And there's a tool available in PAx that will convert the old action buttons into the new action buttons of PAx. There's several reasons behind that that are kind of beyond my pay grade. The other thing is there are certain things that do not work in PAx today that were supported in perspectives. The main one there is right now drill through is not supported. So if you have drill through set up in your TM1 data model itself, and in the old perspectives you would right click on that cell and a drill menu would appear. That is not supported currently in PAx. So that is kind of a key piece of functionality that's not yet supported, though that is planned for to be implemented soon. And there's some other capabilities from the old perspectives environment that are not supported as well. The key one I know from my client standpoint that's not supported is the drill through component. Authentication modes 1 to 5 are supported. Mode 3 though is if you use the integrated login security mode. PAx, it does support that, but if you want to use and have end users interact with the Workspace component and use the dashboard capabilities of Workspace, you cannot use mode 3. So you have to, if you want to use all the components, you have to make sure you set up the right authentication mode. Okay. I want to move on because I actually want to get to the demo part because I'm sure that's what everyone really wants to see. So I'm going to go into sharing mode, I think. Okay, hopefully everyone can see my Excel environment. John, can you confirm that you can see that?
Yes, I can see it, Dan.
Good. So make sure. All right, so I'm in Excel. I have the PAx add-in loaded, and for those of you familiar with Cafe, you'll notice we have a much more broad and expanded ribbon available to us here. To connect to my TM1 server, I come here. I've already set in essence the admin host or the connection string for my PAx environment, so I can see my servers. As you can see, if I have multiple servers, I'd be able to log into multiple servers. I'm going to just go into our SmartCo server. There, based on the type of authentication mode you have, you'll be prompted to enter your ID and password into the different interface. Once I connect in, as soon as I connect in, task pane appears, and I see all the objects available to me from that server. So here are all the cubes, I have dimensions. You also have the ability to show control objects or not show control objects, and you also have the ability to show processes. And you actually have, if you have the rights within TM1, you have the ability to run a process if you want. So you can actually go to run a process from this environment. Since PAx is taking over the old Server Explorer environment where you had the ability to browse data and interact with data and create reports, but you also had the ability to run processes and run chores and so on. They are exposing those components to the PAx environment as well for you to run them, not develop them. They don't want you to use the PAx environment as a development environment. That's going to be changing down the road and being enhanced down the road. But as a consumer of the things that were created on your TM1 server, PAx can be that consumer. So I have the entire set of cubes and dimensions that I have available to me. Again, I'm in as an administrator, so I see the entire model. If I was in as a user with limited capabilities, I'd only see the cubes that were pertinent to my security capabilities. Once you're on you're in the environment and you're working with it, if you want to create something, you create an exploration. A couple of ways you can do it. If you just want to set up the initial concept of an exploration, you would just hit exploration from my toolbar, and that creates a blank exploration object. And from here, I'm going to be using my income statement cube. So from here, I'm going to take my income statement cube. Let me slide it to the top. And I have some views set up for my income statement cube, and I can just take my views. If I drop them into the exploration object, I now see those views. So I can take any view from over here. If I take my expense view, if I drop it in, a view, of course, defines the rows and columns of a view plus the page level selectors. So to kind of go over what's happening here, As soon as I'm in an exploration, notice that my ribbon is now changing. So I have this exploration part of my ribbon for the things I can perform with this exploration. Because it's an exploration, I also have this overview section of my report where it shows me which dimensions are my columns, which dimensions are my rows, which dimensions are my content or page level selectors or slicers, depending on which products you're familiar with over the years. I can slice and dice the data from here, so I can take my organizations and I can bring it over and stack it on my accounts, and I'm going to get, organizations within accounts. I can drag it out and put it over back to my content store. So this gives me that slice and dice capability. Once I have that, if I want to give myself more real estate, I can hide that overview or show that overview. So once it's set up, maybe I want to hide it so I have more real estate. In similar nature, once I'm set up and I want to start interacting with it, if I don't want to show my task pane, I can actually hide my task pane and bring it back when I want to. So let me bring it back. So I'm actually in interface mode. And the Explorer view is interactive, just like our normal TM1 browse capability is interactive. I can double click on my travel. I can expand it. I can collapse my total operating expenses. So it's interacting with the database that's in the background. And I'm going to be going over explorations. I'm going to be going over quick reports, dynamic reports, and I'm going to try to stay with the same basic construct of view as I talk about certain things. So you see what that view looks like in an exploration, what that view looks like in a dynamic report, and or what that view looks like in a quick report. A couple of capabilities that we were talking about. So if I wanted to change something, if I wanted to change the row set here, so I want this basic view, but I want to change the items that are appearing in my row set. I can come up here. There's several ways of doing it. I can come up here, and I can say, okay, I want to edit the set. And the key thing here is when I say edit the set, you're going to have a dialog box appear. Okay, let me try that again. You're going to have a dialog box appear. And for those of you who are familiar with Workspace, this should look very familiar to you. Again, it's using the exact same piece of code from Workspace. So for me to change that set, if I wanted to change the set so that I was looking at a different predefined subset, I'll grab my gross margin review subset, and I'll make the subset equal to that, and I can apply that to the report. So that set editor that you saw was borrowing the code from Workspace to show it to me. That's why, as part of PA Local's installation, you need to use there is a requirement for installing the Workspace component because the two objects or two programs are actually interacting with each other. So that's one way of selecting an item or selecting the driver for your exploration. I can also use my task pane to change the driver. So I can be down here. I'm going to slide down so I have my account dimension. And I can actually take my subsets off of my task pane. So if I wanted to replace what's on my row sets with my depreciation subset, I can grab my depreciation subset. I can drag it. I can highlight the row set and drop it on. And now I'm looking at my depreciation subset. If I wanted to change the subset for my months, I can take my quarters and years, and I can take that and take it and drop it onto my months. So I can use either way to make that selection. On your page level selectors, the items that appear in your page level selector are dependent upon the set that you've worked with. So if I go to the edit set in my organization subset, you'll see that what's here is kind of total company and all the individual components or elements from my organization dimension. But because that list is defined, when I do the drop down here, I can actually just pick the items off of that drop down. So I can actually interact with it directly. I don't need to bring up the subset editor because my organization selection or page level selector here is based on a list of elements. Those elements are available to me to select from here. So make sure I'm covering all the items here. Now, a couple of key items here. You'll notice that different from the browser of TM1, which was disconnected from Excel. This browse that we're looking at is actually connected to Excel. So when I'm here and I am going to just I have a standard view that I'm going to be working with, and I take my account entry view, and I have this laid out, and I've done my work, and let's say I want to save this as a template that I want to give to people to perform the data entry because it's at a low level of accounts. Maybe it's a good view for them to interact with when they're working with the data set, and I can collect data from them. I'm in Excel. I can now take this and I can save this file as an Excel file. I can come here and I say I want to make it my webinar sheet. If I then close this sheet and I go to pick, and then I do a file open, I can bring up that file, and it's going to bring up that exploration for me. So now, different from TM1, where when I had a view, I could save the view, and I could save the definition of the view, and I could save it privately or publicly, which is fine, and it's available to anyone in TM1 Web and so on. I can also save a view or an exploration I've set up, and I can save it as an Excel sheet, and I can share it with people that way. And it is an interactive Excel sheet. So as soon as somebody comes into it, again, it's going to be based on their security. As soon as they come into it, they're going to be interacting with the exploration. It's an interactive exploration. Again, it's, the double clicks and the ability to slice and dice the data work. So you can actually use an exploration as a Excel interface, not just as a standard TM1 view. When you come up here for the exploration toolbar itself, you have the ability to, again, interact with it. I talked about the hiding or unhiding of the overview pane. You also have some capabilities of, I can flip swap my rows and my columns. These are kind of capabilities that exist today in TM1's browser. Again, if I take my dimension, I just drop it on top of another dimension. The switch happens, so it replaced accounts with organizations on my rows and made the accounts page level selector. If I go back to it, I can now look at I go back to my original look. You'll also notice that the formatting of this report is a little different. As I look at payroll and I look at salaries, bonuses, benefits, and taxes, you notice that the color scheme of these is different. And the reason the color scheme of these is different is those are based on rules. So there are rules controlling these values. So I can't enter values into those cells and send the data back into the model because they're controlled by rules. But I can visually see that they're not based on, that I can't enter them in because it's inheriting that fact from TM1, and it knows that cross-section is based on a rule. You notice here in cell phones it's white, so at the low level here of cell phones, I can actually enter a value. So if I enter the new value here, 6565, hopefully you can tell on the screen that this number is now highlighted. It's highlighted as a change, and I can actually then commit that value back into the model, and that actually sends the value back into the model. So as I'm doing the data entry here, this is where it'd be a little bit different than the current TM1 perspective. As I'm doing the data entry here, it's not being sent directly back into the cube at that point in time. I do have to commit the data send. If I put but I do have the same capabilities of TM1 where if I typed in, if I wanted to repeat that for multiple cells, I can take it, I can copy it, I can paste it. Now those four numbers have been changed, and I can commit those values back, and it impacts the model itself. The inheriting of that server-based formatting, where these cells are rule-based and this cell is not, that's up to you whether you want to show that, right? So you can either you can actually apply your own Excel formatting, or you can actually inherit the formatting from the server. Personally, when I'm in a Server Explorer, generally speaking, I apply server formats, but you don't have to. You can turn it into Excel formatting, and you can come in here and you can make these cells whatever you want. So I could from here I can make them yellow, which hopefully stands out. And if I now refresh the data, those cells will look the same, right? Those cells are going to interact the same. But as soon as I go back and I inherit server-based formatting, the next time I refresh that data set, I'm now going to inherit the formatting from the server itself. Okay, once you've laid out a view, you've worked with a view, you do have the ability to save that view. So I'm here, I have my rows and my columns, and I can actually save that view. I could, and this would save a TM1 view. So I can come here, I can say, Dan's view, and it can save it back. And if I have the rights, I can, it'll save as a public view. If or I can save it as a private view that only I can see. And that will save a standard TM1 view. But the key thing with PAx is, you'll notice that we have a button here for MDX. The exploration view that you're seeing here is a full MDX compatible exploration or view, which means there's a lot more things you can do with this view than you could do with the old TM1 view. A couple of things is I can actually insert calculations on the fly. So I, as an end user, could insert calculations. If I wanted to know what's October, November, what's November and December added together, I can highlight those two items. I can then right-click, and I have the ability to insert a calculation. And I can insert, the two numbers added together, the two numbers multiplied by each other, November divided by December, and so on. I'm just going to say the two numbers added together. And now I've created a calculation. Notice there's no Excel formula here. That calculation is it's part of the definition of the view. So as I come along here and I change this and I change from Massachusetts to Florida, that calculation is a live calculation of the view itself. As soon as I do that, as soon as I do something that's beyond the capabilities of a standard TM1 view, you notice that my save view component is no longer available to me because TM1's current view storage mechanism can't understand that. As soon down the road, you'll have the ability to save these more complicated views and reuse these views both in PAx and in the Workspace component. I haven't heard yet on whether the TM1 Web environment is going to be able to work with them or not, but I know the PAx and the Workspace environment will be able to work with them once they're saved. A lot of other capabilities as well. I know in TM1 TM1's browser, you have the ability to sort your items. So if I wanted to sort the items, the row sets of this report, let me just hide my task pane so I get a little more real estate here. I can come over here, I can click on my year, and I can actually I can I'm going to have to move off of that one because I can't find the item right now. No, I'll move off of that one right now because I'm actually running out of time. So again, that's kind of explorations. There's a lot more that you can do with it. There's a lot more capabilities you can do with it than the standard TM1 view. It's a very different way of thinking from an interface standpoint, but its base concept is similar to the TM1 browse. It has pretty much all the capabilities of a TM1 browse, but because it's embedded in Excel and because it's based on an MDX, there's a lot more things you can do with it than a standard TM1 browse. So I'm going to actually pause. And John, are there any questions I should be taking care of now before I move on to quick reports?
Looking. Someone just had a question, Dan, that asked if you could explain what you mean by TM1 browse.
Okay, for those of you, if you're not familiar with TM1 itself, the old current TM1 browse capability is a browsing capability that allows me to slice and dice the data, set things as my rows and my columns, similar to what I'm doing here with the exploration view. So for the people on the call who have a basis of the current TM1 Perspectives Excel add-in, that is for them to understand the transformation of that browser to an exploration in PAx. If you have not worked with the TM1 browser, also for those of you who use TM1 Web, if you use the browser that's part of TM1 Web, that is what I would consider the TM1 browser as well. It has the same capabilities. So I'm just trying to put context for the people who are on this call who are old TM1 Perspectives users, so they understand the capabilities of the exploration view within PAx. The primary focus of this webinar is Planning Analytics Local 2.0, so it really is an upgrade for those people. So I'm trying to bridge the gap of their current environment to a PA local environment as well. So I apologize if that's a little confusing to you based on your background with the product. Anything else, John?
I think one other quick one, Dan. Someone was asking, does PAx work with TM1 10.2.1 or 10.2.2?
PAx works with neither one of those. PAx works with the TM1 server that comes with PA Local 2.0. The PA Local 2.0 is an entire upgrade to your environment, inclusive of the TM1 server. So you have to upgrade your TM1 server. As part of that, the TM1 Web has been enhanced. There's a lot more functionality or performance improvements in TM1 Web, as well as Perspectives as part of that upgrade, and you get PAx along with that upgrade as well. So it's an entire upgrade of your entire environment. This is not an add-in to 10.2 of TM1. It's an entire move to PA Local 2.0.
Okay.
I'm going to get.
I think that's it from there, Dan. Yeah, we can move ahead.
All right. I'm going to just go back to my original template. So I just took my view from my task pane, dropped it on my template, because I want to move on to quick reports. So that's an exploration. As you can see from an exploration, I have some control over my look and feel. I could make my formatting look differently in my Excel sheet, but you're not totally, you can't create any report that you want out of it because of how the environment refreshes and so on. But I can take this view, and just like in the old, and again, I'm sorry, I will keep referring back to the old TM1 browser. The old TM1 browser, you had the ability to slice to Excel, and you had the ability to generate an active form from the Excel, from your browser environment back to Excel to create a interactive Excel sheet. From the exploration view, you also have the ability to generate other types of reports. So once I have an exploration, I can come here and I can convert it to a quick report or a dynamic report or a custom report. And I can say I want to create it on this sheet, which would get rid of the exploration and convert it into a quick report, or I could go to a new sheet in the same workbook, or I could have another workbook open and I could specify a location on that other workbook to create it. So I'm going to say I want to convert it to a quick report on this sheet. So just click that. And what it's doing now is it's generating a report that uses PAx's quick report capabilities. Now, again, because of the purpose of this webinar, which is a PA local concept of transforming from current TM1 to PA local, I am going to focus this conversation a bit on what's the difference between a quick report and an active forms report, right? Because they kind of serve the same type of function. They're an Excel report that you can customize to your heart's content from a look and feel standpoint, but the construct of them is a bit different. So I'm just going to turn off my task pane again to give me a little more real estate to view items. So now we've taken that exploration and we've created a quick report. And you'll notice when I'm clicking on these cells, I don't have a formula here. I have the actual values. But this is an interactive report. If I go to my organization here and I double click, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to base this on a subset to make it a little bit easier to work with. You know what? I'm going to base it on the all member subset. I'm going to bring it over and I'm going to apply that. And you'll notice what we have here is we have an interactive report. Now, as soon as I base that item off of a subset, I have a drop-down available to me of that subset, and as I change the element that's driving the report, the page level selector for my organization, you'll notice that the data itself changes as well. So what's happening here is a quick report is an interactive report. So, it's a live link report to the TM1 database server sitting in the background, but it doesn't use Excel formulas to get that information. What it's using is the definition of what is my rows, what is my columns, and what are my page level selectors, and it's building on the fly an MDX expression of that information. Okay, so what's really happening, and I'm going to go under the hood a little bit here for those of you who want to get under the hood, what's really happening is a quick report is really made up of a series of range names. So when it created the quick report, it actually created these 4 range names, and what they are, one has an S at the end. Those are my slicer or my page level selectors, right? Another one is for my rows, and it defines what's defined in the rows of this quick report. One is for columns, which is what elements are defining the columns, and then the header one is kind of what server this report's based on, and so on. But just so you understand what happened in the background, you don't need to know any of that, but just to understand the construct of what's happened when this quick report was created. So the key to that is there's really an MDX expression that's being defined, and it can quickly go out with that MDX expression, request the data from the TM1 server, and plop it back into the grid very easily. So again, just like when we did the exploration, once we had an exploration on our sheet, our ribbon changed. Now that I have a quick report on the sheet, and I'm dealing with a quick report, I actually have another new ribbon here, which is my quick report ribbon. And from here, there's a couple things we can do. One of them is we have a series of properties we can use with the quick report, and a couple of key things on this one that most people kind of interact with is this use, type, and refresh concept, and I'll get down to some other items here, but the use, type, and refresh, that's what gives me the ability to, as I change the drivers of this, it will automatically refresh that quick report. And when I say that, it will automatically refresh the data that's in this quick report. It doesn't deal with, if I had multiple quick reports on the same sheet, that refresh that's happening now is only for the quick report that I'm interacting with right now. So I'm working with this. I got and I can interact with it. The other thing is I can actually change the definition of the quick report. I can actually add an item to it. Now, a quick report is not dynamic overall. That sounds like a weird statement, but it's not dynamic overall, which means the row set of this report, and I just realized I want to freeze panes. I was going to turn on Excel's freeze panes to make this a little easier to work with. The row set is kind of predefined, but it is interactive. A couple of things, if I double click on an item, you can optionally make that double click work with the Excel sheet. There are options to make that double click work. That's kind of my standard to have it set up that way. There are ways to have that double click work where it just, it expands and collapses the items from the dimension itself, or you can actually have it just replace the entire row definition of the quick report. So it is interactive, but the overall row set is not dynamic like an active form, right? So if you had an active form report row that was defined by an MDX expression, if you went into the account dimension, you added a new account, it would automatically appear the definition of that active form. A quick report is not that, but it is interactive in that it, as you interact with it, and you double click and you expand and collapse, it will inherit the definition of the account dimension at that point in time. I can also add items to this, and I'm just going to make it a little bit easier for myself. If I type in a valid account here, 6320, you'll know 6320 is up here. It's the maintenance account. If I type in 6320, as soon as I type that in, PAx recognizes that that's a valid account, and it fills in that item for the row set, as if the DBR formulas, if you will, for those of you who are familiar with the old TM1 perspectives, that in were automatically put in there for me. Now, one thing you're going to notice is right now it's not formatted very well. It's just, it didn't inherit a formatting. Again, if you remember the exploration concept, I can either inherit or not inherit the definitions of the server formatting. So when I come in here and I go to my my ribbon, when I'm looking at the properties, one of the property settings was to inherit or not inherit the server formatting. So when I click OK to that, now I'm going to inherit the formatting from the server. So now I have a report where as I'm drilling and as I'm working with it, I'm going to inherit the basis of the formatting. Now, why is that important? Well, if I wanted to have a quick report and I want it to be a data entry form at a low level, when I'm looking at a low-level item, and I think Massachusetts is the one I've been working with mostly, again, notice that the cells that are based on rules, I now see the definition of the fact that these are based on rules, and that immediately gives me a visual key that I cannot enter values into that cross-section. So it's a nice way of creating a report without having to use conditional formatting of Excel, to identify where people can and cannot enter information. It's a nice little capability. In a quick report, you are allowed to send data back into the cube, right? Again, same as in exploration. If I change numbers, I can copy paste. Again, I don't have formulas here anymore, right? So if I copy values across, or I enter values, as soon as I do that, I can then commit those values. So I see that they're blue. Those are the number changes compared to the data that was originally part of the refresh. I now commit those values. As soon as I commit those values, I can see that impact. I can also, at a total level, like year, I can change the value there. So I'll change it to 3.3 million. And if I commit that value, you'll notice that the underlying monthly values will proportionally change based on that change, to make sure that the total for the year is the total that I gave it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Oh, and of course, once you have a quick report like this, if you want to add your own items onto it, right? So if I wanted to create a average, and I want to say equals I'm going to just hopefully use my Excel skills if I can type today. I'm going to just create an average of all 12 of the months. I can then take that value, copy it down, and I can just like you're creating a report, using the old perspectives data, and I can have that interact with the data from, I can have my Excel formulas interact with the values coming in from the quick report. So now as I go over here, if I wanted to pick a different company, those Excel formulas interact with it. The other key with PAx that's very different from perspectives, with PAx you are no longer starting with your formula calculation in manual mode. You're in AutoCalc mode. That's the way it should work. So that's another difference between the old perspectives environment and the PAx environment. Okay, I'm trying to be cognizant of time and leave at least a couple of minutes to answer any overall questions, overriding questions. But John, before I move on to dynamic reports, are there any questions on the quick report concepts?
Yeah, there are a couple, Dan. Can quick reports be published to PAW?
Quick reports cannot be published to, well, quick reports can be published to TM1 Web, and since PAW can see a TM1 Web sheet, the answer is yes. But yeah, so quick reports, all these reports can be published to TM1 Web, and because PAW can see TM1 Web sheets, you can see them in PAW, which is Planning Analytics Workspace. The key there is if you publish, and here's in fact, let me just do that right now. I'll cover that right now. So Planning Analytics for Excel has a publish capability just like the old perspectives. So I can take a sheet, and I'm going to, let me save this sheet. I'll save it as PM1, a little off script here, but that's fine. TM1 Web, and I'll say just quick so I know what it is. And I can take this sheet and I can publish it. The interface is a little bit different, but the concept is the same. I navigate down my applications tree. I create a little folder for this webinar. I'm going to publish it there. And that will publish my quick report, and I'm going to show it to you. But let me first go over. So a exploration published to the web. So I could have taken an exploration and published it, but if I did that, it would act like a snapshot. It would be as if I had snapshotted that exploration and just left the data there, and I could visualize it in TM1 Web. With a quick report, it does become an interactive report. I go over to our TM1 Web environment, and luckily my ID and password are automated, so I don't have to type it. And I'm going to bring up my TM1 Web environment. This will show you a couple of things. First of all, the web environment has been changed as part of PA Local 2.0, so it does have a little bit of a different skin to it. But this basic functionality is still the same. So if I'm in, here's my application folder. If I go to that report that I just published, it will appear, and it is interactive. But it does work slightly different in that the selector item does work. It looks a little bit different, but it performs the same basic function. So I do have a selector item. I can change it. It does interact with the report. This is all still I can still enter data. So if I go to Massachusetts, you'll see the data entry capability. I can still enter the data. I can commit that data and so on. But the quick report does look a little bit different in the web, so you have to get used to that and figure out how you want to work with it. But yeah, quick reports can be published to the web, and they're consumable by Planning Analytics Workspace. I can also, while I'm in the Excel environment, let's flip back to the Excel environment, I can open a sheet that's been published, right? So I can go to my Open folder, and I can navigate down, and just because of the time, I'm actually going to navigate to another report, and I'm going to bring that down from our application folder of TM1. I'm going to open that, and now I can interact with that report, change it, and republish it back up to TM1. This report is a custom report, so this is purely a report done in TM1 using the standard DBR formulas. So I have subnym functions here. They put little icons so it looks like the drop downs of Planning Analytics Workspace, but it's just a cell with a subnym function on it with a icon to make it look like Planning Analytics Workspace. But no, if I double click my subnym function, I'm going to get the same set editor. I may use this as my opportunity to flip back to our I actually use this as an opportunity to go back to our presentation. Sorry about that. And hopefully handle the questions that came up.